Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, the list is finally here. Top 10 quarterbacks in college football heading into 2024. And I think the most important part of this episode, need to hear from you guys in the comments section. There are a lot of different ways you could compose this list. The boys certainly do not agree on our own top 10 quarterbacks. So we're going to go back and forth. Many of you guys are going to agree, disagree. Let it fly in the comment section. That's the beauty of doing these lists in the preseason. And I think specifically this year with the quarterbacks, a lot of different ways that you could stack these guys. Would love to hear from y'all. And if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Cannot tell you guys how much the support has meant to the boys heading into 2024. So if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, let's get into this list. I think the one spot where we are both in agreement, number one quarterback in 2024, Carson Beck from the Georgia Bulldogs. How are we feeling?
Yeah, I really think it's hard to argue with Carson Beck. I just think the way he was playing last year and how he was elevating that Georgia team, even beyond kind of what you'd seen in the past with the Georgia passing attack, his ability to push the ball down the field, doesn't make a ton of mistakes, only took 11 sacks on the year. And I know Georgia's got a really, really good offensive line, but he just didn't do a whole lot to hurt that football team, did a lot to elevate them. And again, I think what you're looking for is if he can hit a few more of those really explosive plays, those big, long touchdowns, and he does have a few more vertical targets, guys on the boundary who I think can make those plays for him, I think you kind of look. I don't know where the hole in his game is.
Yeah, that's kind of where it starts with Carson Beck. There's not really a hole. And I think heading into the 2023 season, I'll put my hand up and say I just missed it on Carson Beck. I kind of figured that Kirby Smart names Carson Beck the starting quarterback over Brock Vandagriff to be kind of a game manager, a quarterback that doesn't make mistakes. And although that part was true, right? He did make a lot of mistakes. He, like you said, just enhanced this Georgia passing attack. I think he's one of the more talented Georgia quarterbacks we've seen in quite a long time. And again, I think the consistency combined with elevating that Georgia offense, if there's a quarterback that you're asking me to head into a 2024 college football season to win 12 plus games, it's probably going to be Carson Beck. Going to our number two quarterback, let's go to Sheduer Sanders. I think we're both in agreement on this one as well. I'll start with Sheduer. I think his ability to make kind of, those jaw-dropping throws, fit it into tight windows, pushing the ball down the field, but also, 3 interceptions, only 1.6% of his plays turnover worthy. The ability to kind of walk that fine line of being a difference maker at the quarterback position, pushing the ball down the field, but also not turning the ball over is a line that a lot of quarterbacks struggle to kind of walk. I think Sheduer Sanders did a phenomenal job in 2023 walking that line.
And you see that completion percentage right up around 70%, but that's making plays. That's not being like, again, you saw Bo Nix's completion percentage up last year, but he wasn't asked to do as much, obviously, as Sheduer Sanders. So the ability to be efficient in the way he is while being asked to do a lot, I think the one thing, again, when we're kind of like looking, how do you stack these lists? I think you want to see him play better against the really good teams they're going to face. And it wasn't, and I get it. It's not his fault necessarily. It's like when they went and played Oregon, they were just outclassed everywhere. That offensive line really didn't give him a chance. So again, you upgrade the talent around him. And if he goes out and plays big time games against teams like Kansas State and some of those other kind of marquee teams in the Big 12, I think you could certainly put him in that argument for number one quarterback.
100%. I think there's a strong argument that Sheduer Sanders is the best quarterback in the league. And he's kind of a polarizing figure, but you go back and watch the 2023 tape. The offensive line, you said it was an absolute disaster. That's why I kind of included that stat. When he was kept clean, that completion percentage shot all the way up to 77%. I think he's a difference maker at the quarterback position. I think the offensive line is going to be improved from the 2023 season. I think Sheduer Sanders puts together quite a season in 2024. Going to our number 3 quarterback in Dill, this is, I think, kind of me just putting my stake in the ground. I think this is about as high as you'll see Dillon Gabriel, man. I'm a believer in this kid. I think it starts with just what he's done throughout his college football career. Over 14,000 yards, 125 touchdowns to only 26 interceptions. We've seen quarterbacks with a lot of experience really put it together as veterans, right? We saw Bo Nix, we saw Michael Penix, a lot of guys that have just seen a lot of football play their best towards the end of their college football career. And even you go back to the Oklahoma film in 2023, over 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions with almost a 70% completion percentage. And think the one knock that you have is, all right, is Dylan Gabriel's arm talent to the likes of someone like Sheduer Sanders? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But in terms of what he was asked to do, you see the 50% completion percentage, 20 plus yards down the field, one of the highest marks in the country, an average depth of target of 10.2 yards. So again, his arm talent is more than good enough to be an elite quarterback at the college football level. And again, these are college football rankings. I'm not necessarily projecting Dylan Gabriel to be the first quarterback off the board come April in the NFL draft. But if you ask me to win with a quarterback at the college football level, there's not many quarterbacks that I'm taking over Dylan Gabriel for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, you can't argue with Dylan Gabriel not being in that top 7. I think, again, when you start to splice it around, when you got guys like Cook or Dart, even like guys who I think have shown more moments of like pure brilliance or really, really kind of elevating their team. And Dylan Gabriel does what you kind of want your quarterback to do. Doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes, ultra efficient. He's a perfect fit in that Oregon offense. But again, when you talk about some of these other guys, that's where, again, like how do you kind of stack that idea that he doesn't do a whole lot that's like brilliant, if you will. He's not a great athlete. He's not a great thrower of the football, but his game it's really
I'd push back on you with the athleticism. Like you go back and watch him. He's not necessarily the biggest athlete. He ain't no Jalen Milroe back there, but you saw the twitch in the pocket, the ability to break the pocket, extend plays. He can certainly do that. And again, I think for Oregon fans, what you're most excited about is the fit in this Oregon Ducks offense. I mean, you talk about a quarterback that's getting the ball out quickly, on time, accurately. That's Dylan Gabriel. Very similar to kind of how Bo Nix thrived in that Oregon system. I think the quarterback position always has a lot to do with the scheme around him. I think this is a perfect fit. And Dill, I don't know if Dylan Gabriel is going to be able to put up the numbers because the rushing attack is going to be really good. If you were talking about an early Heisman candidate for me, I think Dylan Gabriel is going to fill it up from a production standpoint. And again, I think the last thing I want to note, I know I kind of already hit on it, the arm talent and the arm strength is more than enough. I feel like this kid gets knocked for having like a noodle arm, 50% completion percentage, 20 plus yards down the field, a 10.2 yards average depth of target. That is higher than most quarterbacks that we're talking about on this list. I think the arm talent is much better than a lot of people give him credit for. Going to number 4, and Dill, this is a guy I kind of let you have the T-box here, Jackson Dart for Ole Miss going into 2024, a kid that's just gotten better every single year within this Ole Miss offense. How are we feeling about Jackson Dart coming in at the number 4 spot?
I mean, you said it exactly, kind of what you want. Like he comes in, obviously transferring from USC, and you see the moments of like the real special moments, if you will, but you saw a lot of inconsistency through some of those years. And then by the end of the year last year, he was really playing at an ultra high level. In that bowl game, that's about as good a quarterback as you'll see. And he's got all the weapons he needs, really good athlete, good playmaker, which I think is one thing. Again, when we're kind of splitting these hairs down with like him versus Dylan Gabriel, I think he is a bit more of a playmaker. He can do a little bit more when things aren't perfect around him. And I think that's frankly a big thing. I think that's something Sheduer's got that is big. I think that's something some of these other guys have. And Jackson Dart certainly falls in that category where I think he can make lemonade out of lemons at times. And I think that's really important.
Wine out of water, to quote Jim Harbaugh. And I would probably agree. Like if you were looking for a quarterback that can do a little bit more, Jackson Dart can probably do a little bit more than Dylan Gabriel. And I think the thing with Jackson Dart is he got better in 2 massive categories. One, pushing the ball down the field. We saw in the 2022 year struggled when those shots were there, and then struggled with the turnover-worthy plays and turning the football over. I think he got better in both of those categories. And I think what's so exciting for me going into 2024 is what happens if he takes, say, another step in the right direction. This is a guy that has consistently gotten better during his career. Now going into year 4, I think
especially just playing more efficient, because that's what really stood out last year. He wasn't missing some of those throws. He was missing those early in his career where you're like, oh man, this guy can be so good, but you can't miss that swing route. It has to be on target. I thought last year you started to see that, and it culminated against Penn State in that bowl game. If he plays that way, he is a problem for college football.
Going on to another one, very similar story, I think, with Jackson Dart, number 5, Quinn Ewers. Now, this is a kid that could be the number 1 quarterback off the board for the NFL draft in a couple of months. Though I think there's still meat left on the bone. I think a lot of Texas fans, quite frankly, would agree with that as well. He cut down on the turnovers, only 1% turnover-worthy plays. That's very impressive. The 2 things that stand out to me, one, I want to see him continue to hit that deep ball a little bit more consistently, right? Coach Sark's going to scheme him up. A 34% completion percentage, 20-plus yards down the field. That feels like that can be better in 2024. I expect it to be better in 2024. And I think he got much better at being a playmaker at that quarterback position. You talk about extending plays, being an athlete. Again, this kid has maybe the best arm talent in all of the country. You just want him to build on it in the 2024 year.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for me is frankly like being comfortable kind of putting him up in that top 5 kind of question. I think if he was still the same guy he was last year, especially from an athletic standpoint, or 2022, I should say, I'd be a lot less comfortable because, again, I think there's kind of bare minimums you need to be hitting in terms of being able to make plays with your feet, being able to avoid sacks. I think that's still something he's kind of working on. 27 is not a bad number taking sacks, but with the offensive line that Texas has and with the scheme he's kind of working in, I think that feels a little bit high. So maybe you'd like to see some of that cut down. But I think you said it. He made a huge jump last year. I think he played at a really high level, and you're probably right. I mean, with all those weapons, you do want to probably see him hit more of those big.
I have a question for you and for the Texas fans that have watched a lot of Quinn Ewers, or just college football fans who've watched a lot of Texas football. Do you want to see him throw some more laser beams? I feel like sometimes he's just too much touch, too much layering, and not just ripping it and ripping it. And again, he has some of the better touch that we've seen in college football. Again, the arm talent is special. They'll sometimes just want to see him drill it in there. And I think that's another thing that maybe he could add to his game heading into 2024, because we know he can do it. You just got to see it on the field in 2024. Going to number 6, I'm probably one of the higher than most in terms of quarterback Cam Ward. Dill, the one difference that we are talking about with Cam Ward than the other 5 players we just talked about is Cam Ward didn't have NFL talent around him. There was not a single player, I believe, and you guys can fact check me in the comment section. Was there a single player on Washington State's offense that moved on to the NFL? And I'm not saying it was bad, but it certainly wasn't great. I mean, the offensive line wasn't great. The running game was bottom 4 in the country. Like, Cam Ward had to do a lot for that Washington State offense over the last 2 years. And you look at the numbers, 2023, 3,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 picks, a 67% completion percentage, could push the ball down the field. I think the only knock that you have is got to hold on to the football in the pocket. I think he fumbled, 6 or 7 times in 2023. I think Cam Ward's going to benefit massively from coming to a Miami offense that we think has really good offensive line, going to have a really good run game, talent on the outside. This team's just going to be much better around him than he had at Washington State. I expect a phenomenal year for Cam Ward in 2024.
I don't mind this at all where you put him. I think, again, you kind of look at the numbers and you dig into him. I mean, a really, really good year, really, really good with the completion percentage, efficient, can make those big time throws. I think you said the exact kind of thing that's holding him out of that top 5 conversation, and that's making too many plays that really, really hurt your team, whether it's fumbling, taking a lot of sacks. I mean, 38, that's a fair amount of sacks. Yep. And again, obviously working with an offensive line that definitely wasn't killing it. But again, those plays that I think especially at Miami this year, you're just looking for him not to make them. That'll be kind of a big question, because if he plays clean for most of the year, that Miami team is going to be a problem. But also, I think that he'll have a better opportunity to play that way more so than he had at Washington.
I think that the sack rate's also really important. Like, going back and watching at Washington State, yes, sometimes it was on the offensive line, but sometimes Cam Ward just holding on to the football. And you've got to be able to just, hey, go through your progressions. If it's not there, we're checking it down. You can't take those drive-killing sacks. Kind of fired up that you're throwing in these sack stats, because I think it's so important to a quarterback. I mean, if you are a quarterback, you can't take those drive-killing plays. Cam Ward's got to work on that heading into 2024, but one of the more talented arms that we see in the country heading into the fall. Going to number 7, they'll know if Fafita, this kid is, I want to start with just a gamer. Like, this kid was a low 3-star ranked kid coming to Arizona, redshirts his freshman year, takes over for Jaden Delore around week 3, week 4, and just doesn't look back. He's a flamethrower, not necessarily the biggest in stature, but dude, this kid rips it around the football field. I think you just want to see a little bit more of the sample size, because, again, we saw about a quarter of a season from Noah Fafita. What we saw, one gamer can extend plays. You're looking at one of the better quarterback wide receiver batteries with him and T-Mac. I love this kid heading into 2024, fired up to see what he can do after a very successful 2023 season.
And you said it exactly right. I mean, he's that type of guy that when he's on a team, he's elevating them. And that's again
Yes.
these things that you're looking. A lot of these guys are on really, really good football teams, and they run their respective offenses really effectively, but they're not necessarily asked to do it. No, if Fifita's asked to do it. I mean, you saw how much pressure is put on that passing attack. Really, him and T-Mac together to make that thing happen, make that work out Arizona. And whenever he's put in position, he really was consistently delivering, not making a ton of mistakes, even while being asked to do all that. I think he's a guy, frankly, he puts a big time year out this year. It's really, really hard to keep him out of the top five just because that, what you kind of said, his ability to change a game it's a little unique.
And I would agree with you. I mean, one of the things that you have to look for when you're evaluating quarterbacks, are you winning football games? They'll know if he just won 10 games at Arizona. That's a team that normally wins 3. You talk about a quarterback that's elevating a program. Noah Fifita is that guy. I just talked myself into maybe being a little bit low on Noah Fifita heading into 2024. This kid is an absolute gamer. Going to number 8, Jalen Milroe. I was very confused on where to put Jalen Milroe. You start breaking him down and say the flashes are so big time, right? Obviously, he's a phenomenal athlete, over 500 rushing yards. 35 missed tackles forced is more than running backs, an absolutely ludicrous number from Jalen Milroe. There are a couple things that you love about Jalen Milroe. I mean, a 13.4 yards average depth of target, a 52% completion percentage when going 20-plus yards down the field. He's got one of the best deep balls in all of college football. Now, I think the problem is, and why I have him at number 8, is the consistency and the well-rounded part of his game. Maybe not quite there. I think Alabama fans should be really optimistic that Kalen DeBoer can kind of maximize his potential, because you talk about a maximized Jalen Milroe. You were looking at one of the more dangerous players in all of college football. You just want to see him put it together, right? The short intermediate passing concepts, he very much struggled in. You'll have some throws where he makes your jaw drop, and then the next play, he's burying it at the feet of receivers. You just want to see a little bit more consistency from Jalen Milroe. If you push that together, and this kid is going to be dangerous in 2024.
Again, we're talking like, does he have something elite? Like, no doubt about that. I mean, the way he runs and like some of those guys, you go to that LSU game, for example, he plays like that all year. He's as good as anyone in the country. I thought that's a super dominant game. Again, not the greatest defense in the world, arguably, or not arguably. There's so defense in the country, but he was dominating that game, running around, making the throws he's supposed to make. I'm kind of with you. I mean, the reason you can't put him top 5 is there are still a lot of those plays that really knock you off course. I got another guy who took a lot of sacks at 44, which is astonishingly high, I'd say, especially because he only threw the ball 284 times. So that's a lot of sacks. And those weren't, I mean, there were certainly some struggles with Alabama's offensive line early, but there was a lot of holding the ball a little bit too. So again, another year as the starter. Kalen DeBoer is a magical developer of quarterbacks. I think he's got the tool set to do it. It's going to be really interesting to see what he does.
And what I'd say is, not only is Kalen DeBoer very good at developing quarterbacks, he's very good at developing offenses around quarterbacks. And when you saw Jalen Milroe play his best football, like that LSU game, they were leaning in to what Jalen Milroe does best. At times last year, they were treating Jalen Milroe like he's a pocket passer. Like, that's just not his game. You have to have the ability to scheme around your players' best traits. When Alabama started to do that, like the LSU game, that's the best version of Jalen Milroe that we saw. Going into number 9, and Dill, I think we're going to be high. At least I think this is higher than consensus for most. This is too low for you, so I'll just let you cook on Brady Cook coming in at number 9.
I don't get Brady Cook, why he's not talked about as like bordering in that top 5 range. I think you kind of look, again, if you only kind of think that 2022 season, which frankly I think a lot of people are anchoring to, yeah, there wasn't a ton of polish on that game. I mean, again, a bit of a gamer for sure, a guy who he figured things out. He marched that team down the field kind of by hook or by crook, and he made it work. I think last year, just the way he kind of tightened up his game. I mean, not missing a ton of throws, almost 66% completion percentage, really good number, and a guy who does manufacture big plays along with the help of a really, really good wide receiver in Luther Burden. And he threw the ball at a really, really high level. I think that's another underrated part of his game.
You said it best. Brady Cook, another one, kind of like Noah Fifita. This kid's just a gamer. And you look at Missouri and all the success they had, a lot of it had to do with Brady Cook, not only just being a damn good quarterback, but also being just like the heart and soul of that Missouri offense. the numbers are dang good, right? 3,300 yards, 21 touchdowns, only 6 picks. And Dill, I love the average depth target, like 9.6 yards, a 46.8% completion percentage when pushing the ball 20 plus yards down the field. Brady Cook made some high-level throws that not enough people give him credit for. I think you're spot on. I think a lot of people think of Brady Cook from the 2022 season as just being a scrappy quarterback. Don't get me wrong.
He'd win the job, but he'd come in and fight and move the ball. But like last year, when he got the chance to take that operation over, I thought he was electric.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong. Brady Cook's a gamer. He's scrappy. That's part of his game. But he's also a dang good quarterback that I don't think enough people give credit for what we saw in 2023. Going to number 10 before we get to some honorable mentions. Guy that just not getting talked enough about, Cam Rising. And I think you got to start with one of the most important metrics I evaluate quarterbacks is, are you winning football games? Cam Rising's a winner, man. I mean, like the last 2 seasons, we saw him healthy, 2 conference championships, in a Pac-12 that the last couple of years has been quite good. He also gets it done on the ground. Again, I don't know if it's the super high upside arm talent that's doing it for Cam Rising, kind of similar to how we just talked about with Dylan Gabriel. You're seeing a lot of veteran quarterbacks who've been around the sport for a very long time, have a lot of success. I think Cam Rising is going to be one of those guys heading into the 2024 year.
Yeah, I don't mind this at all. But again, another guy who I almost want to see him put the sheen on that maybe Brady Cook did. I think there's still that element of sometimes it doesn't look like what you want it to look like. Yeah. And he, frankly, didn't have the wide receiver talent last time we saw him. That he did have to do a lot of that himself. I don't think he had those guys. I think Utah has done a better job. They're going to have a pretty talented group on the outside for him this year. So I think he's going to have his chance to kind of prove that he's more than just like a good solid winner on a team that wants to just kind of grind you down a little bit and get the ball or keep the ball, possess it, run the ball pretty good and work off play action. I think now he does have the talent on the outside to maybe show something, but I think you still probably want to see it before you really take him into that like top 5 kind of conversation.
Agreed. And I don't know, and I don't think Utah fans would fight me on this. I don't know if Cam Rising will be a top 5 quarterback. Again, I just don't know if the physical traits are necessarily super, super high, but he's just a winner at the quarterback position. That's something that I value when I'm evaluating quarterbacks. Let's give a few honorable mentions. Now, the guy I want to talk about here is Connor Wigman. So you look at DJU, obviously a ton of talent and has gotten better during his college football career. Not quite ready to put him as a top 10 quarterback. You look at Jalen Daniels, super good quarterback, just has to stay healthy. Caden Salter dominating the group of 5. Connor Wigman is the guy that I wanted to emphasize. I think we can
awesome. His numbers before he got hurt were like really good
on a Texas A&M offense that, I mean, I think it looked better with Bobby Petrino there, but it still wasn't like very suitable to high level quarterback play. And secondly, the offensive line was a disaster. I mean, I think Connor Wigman, if you give him a good offensive line, which we are believers in Adam Cushion and Mike Elko to do so, I think we're going to be talking about Connor Wigman as one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Can't put him as a top 10 quarterback right now, but if you were asking me to project, Connor Wigman is the guy I'm banging the table for.
And a sneaky good athlete working in that Colin Klein system. I think that's another one of those guys that you don't think of like good athlete when you think Connor Wigman, but he does do a good job extending plays, getting first downs with those legs, making those sort of plays. I'm with you. When I went back looking at the numbers, I was like, oh, Connor Wigman's like a guy who's kind of like in my radar of top quarterbacks, but like certainly not like Quinn Ewers, if you will. His numbers stack up. I mean, I know he didn't get into the heart of the SEC schedule necessarily, but against that Miami team, really, really good defense, looked really, really good, dealing with a lot of adversity.
And you go to the actual, like the film of it. I mean, again, the Texas A&M offensive line was a disaster. That kid was being a hero for Texas A&M at the quarterback spot. That's the kid I'm kind of hitching my wagon to. Dude, we'll cut it there. Again, we left some good quarterbacks off the list, even with the honorable mentions. A guy like Garrett Green, I know some West Virginia fans going to light us up in the comment section there. Would love to hear from you guys. Not everyone's going to agree with the list. Would love to hear you guys listen in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it, and we'll talk to y'all